They say you can measure a man's worth by what he builds, but in corporate America, sometimes they measure you by how easily they can erase your name from the door. My name is Daniel Rourke. I'm 46 years old. Until about 6 hours ago, I was Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth at Tech Global, a firm you've probably never heard of unless you're deep in B2B analytics. That's fine. I didn't take the job for the headlines. I took it to build something real, and I did. My division accounted for 52% of company-wide earnings last fiscal year. We onboarded 6 Fortune 5s, cut churn by 38%, and set a record for year-over-year net revenue increase. But none of that mattered when she walked in. Emery Vale, the new CEO. Just 33, all LinkedIn buzzwords and surgically precise diction. I'd done my homework, Harvard MBA, fast-track board appointments, loved the sound of her own disruption. The kind of leader who believed tradition was just a longer word for dead weight. From the moment she stepped into the executive suite, I knew I was on borrowed time. Still, I didn't expect it to be this fast, or this rehearsed. She called me into the boardroom at 9:02 a.m. Everything about the room was glass and chrome, polished like a surgical bay. I could hear the faint echo of my shoes as I walked in. Emery sat at the head of the table, tablet in hand, back straight, not a hair out of place. The head of HR, a man who'd known me for 10 years, sat beside her looking like he wanted to sink into the leather. "Daniel," she began, her voice soft but hollow, "thank you for joining us. I want to start by acknowledging your contributions to Tech. Truly impressive work." Translation: "You're about to get gutted, but let's dress it in compliments first." She launched into a speech about the company's evolving vision, about streamlining leadership to reflect a more modern, agile workplace culture, about positioning ourselves for tomorrow, not yesterday. Every word carefully chosen, every sentence preloaded. My name didn't appear again until the very end. "We're moving forward," she said, folding her hands on the table, "and you represent what we're leaving behind." I stared at her for a second, not angry, just quiet. "Understood," I said. HR slid a folder across the table. Severance details, legal waivers, all the expected paperwork. Emery stood and extended her hand. I took it, firm grip, no hesitation. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, and then I walked out. No speech, no resistance. Not even a glance back at the glass-walled office where I'd spent the last 11 years of my life. I walked past the open-plan floor where my team worked in synchronized harmony, past the receptionist, who looked up at me and blinked twice, past the elevator doors that had once opened to promotions, partnerships, and 5-minute pep talks that turned into quarter-saving strategies. When the elevator finally opened, I stepped inside, buttoned my coat, and hit L. The doors closed silently. Back at my apartment, small, spare, no family pictures on the walls, I loosened my tie, poured a scotch, and sat at the desk in the corner of the room. I hadn't touched that desk in months. Beneath it, taped to the underside like a last resort, was a red folder with a single label: "Break glass only." I peeled it off and opened it. Inside, a list of names, notes, contracts never signed, ideas never pitched, email chains I'd archived but never deleted. It was a blueprint, one I never thought I'd need, one I'd written 5 years ago during a different merger when the ground first started shifting. I told myself then it was just precaution. Now, it felt like prophecy. I powered on my laptop. It chimed to life. My fingers moved before I even realized I was typing. Messages to former colleagues, clients, quiet allies. I didn't offer rage. I offered opportunity, clarity. A way forward that didn't require bowing to buzzwords or sacrificing the people who'd built the engine just to polish the hood ornament. By midnight, I had 8 replies. 4 agreed to meet within the week. 1 sent me a list of their own. I felt something then. Not vindication, not even anger. Focus. She thought she'd buried me in strategy slides and rehearsed exits. But Emery Vale had just done something extraordinary. She'd taken a man who had learned to live comfortably inside the system and given him a reason to tear it down. Quietly, strategically, with the same calm I used when I tripled quarterly margins 2 years ago. This wasn't about a title anymore, or even revenge. This was about reminding them who I was by showing them what I could still build without them. The war had begun, and I wouldn't raise my voice once. The first week after I was fired, my calendar filled up faster than it had in months. Not with board meetings or quarterly reviews, those were over, but with coffee shop sit-downs, late-night phone calls, and quiet lunches in corner booths where no one wore name badges or asked for the check too quickly. They were all the same kind of people, seasoned, steady, brilliant in ways the company never celebrated. Some had already been forced out by Emery's regime. Others saw the writing on the wall and were trying to outpace the axe. I called them one by one, never with a sales pitch, just a question. How are you doing with all this? Sometimes that was enough to open the floodgates. One of the first was Cara Mendez, my former operations lead. We met at a low-lit Italian place she liked near South Park. She showed up 5 minutes late, eyes sharp but tired. She didn't order anything, just folded her arms on the table and said, "If this is about joining whatever you're building, Dan, I need to know it's not just a vanity play." I nodded, fair. She'd spent 13 years keeping our wheels turning without demanding a spotlight. Emery had replaced her with a flashy consultant 3 weeks before she let me go. "I'm not building a monument," I said. "I'm building a company that rewards people who know what they're doing and remembers who got us here." She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't walk out either. By the end of the week, I'd had similar conversations with 8 more people. Each meeting peeled off another layer of uncertainty, for them and for me. I had no brand, no office, no funding yet. Just a Google Doc, a series of secured Slack invites, and the conviction that loyalty had to mean something again. Still, doubt found its way in. One night, I sat in a rented co-working space downtown, converted warehouse, exposed brick, bad acoustics, and stared at the whiteboard we'd filled with feature sets and early-phase targets. No team photo, no logo, just silent ideas waiting for momentum. Was I chasing a ghost? Was this just pride, dressed up as vision? That's when Marcus called, my old head of product, fired 6 months ago in what they called a strategic pivot. He'd been consulting for smaller firms since, but none of them had the scale to challenge Laurentech. "You really doing this?" he asked. "I am." "Then I'm in." He didn't ask about equity or salary. He didn't need a brochure. He just needed a reason to believe again. That call lit something in me I hadn't felt since the early days, when we built departments from scratch and lived off coffee, whiteboards, and blind faith. Once Marcus came on, others followed. We took a small sublease in an outdated building in Easton, not the tech corridor, but cheap and quiet. We set up folding tables and brought our own routers. Cara built the operations pipeline in 4 days. Marcus started mocking up the core product with a small dev team he'd poached from his freelance network. I reached out to 3 clients I knew were growing frustrated with Laurentech's modernization. One agreed to sign an NDA. Another asked for a pitch deck. The third just said, "Where do I sign?" Still, even as things began to move, I could feel the fragility under the surface. These people had been burned. Some were still nursing the wounds. They weren't looking for a messiah. They were looking for a place where they didn't have to wear armor to work. So I called a dinner meeting, rented out the back patio of a little Thai place off Delaney. Nothing formal, just a table, plates, and space to speak. They were quiet at first, all of them. Not out of distrust, but out of exhaustion. They'd given their best years to a place that measured their worth in optics. Now, here I was, asking them to start again. So I told them the truth. This isn't about revenge. It's not about proving her wrong. It's about proving us right. About building something where no one has to check their value against the mood of a boardroom. We've already done the hard part. We survived. Now we build. It wasn't a speech. It was a promise. Cara raised her glass. "Then let's build." That night, I walked back to the office alone. The streets were mostly empty, the city humming quietly in the distance. I climbed the stairs to our makeshift space, sat down at my laptop, and updated the roadmap. Version 1.0 was underway. Emery had no idea. But soon enough she would. The investor's pen hovered over the paper for a second too long. His eyes flicked from the term sheet to me, and back again. I could hear the ticking of the cheap hotel clock we'd rented the conference room in. No catered lunch, no fanfare. Just raw numbers and the tension of a deal that could decide the next 3 years of my life. "You're asking for $5 million on a pre-money of 30, he said, tone flat. Without a brand, without press, without assurance that Emery Vale won't bury you the second you surface. I leaned forward slightly. I'm asking for $5 million to solve the problem Laurentech created when they stopped listening to their clients and started listening to buzzwords. He cracked the faintest smile, then signed. It was the first real capital injection, enough to expand our dev cycle, hire a marketing head, and give Kara and Marcus the salaries they'd more than earned. I didn't exhale until I was back in the elevator, buttoning my coat with shaking fingers. We weren't just an idea anymore. We were a company, quiet, sharp, and very real. The name we chose, Pendrell Systems, wasn't flashy. No neon logos or lowercase tech culture nonsense, just solid, grounded identity. The kind that sounds like it's always been around. We launched under embargo, no press release, no LinkedIn flood. Just a trickle of DMS, warm intros, and discreet strategy decks sent to decision makers who already knew what Laurentech had lost when they let me walk. Most replied within hours, a few requested meetings. One stood out. Dianex Corporation, 15-year account. I'd managed them personally for 8 of those. Complex needs, legacy architecture, but we'd always delivered. When Emery took over, she replaced our entire support model with an AI ticket system and a 72-hour SLA buffer. It was only a matter of time. I met their vice president of operations, Grace Dalton, at an old steakhouse 2 blocks from our former headquarters. She arrived early. I was already seated. "I heard you weren't staying quiet after all," she said as she sat. "Never planned to?" She opened the folder I'd brought: service tiers, migration strategy, personalized support models. By the 3rd page, she was nodding. "This is what we asked for a year ago." "I know." We signed the agreement in less time than it took to order dinner. 2 days later, I got the call from Laurentech's legal. The voice on the other end was sharp, clipped. "You are in breach of your non-compete. Your client acquisition violates Clause 16B of your exit agreement." I didn't flinch. "Read the fine print. 16B only applies to accounts onboarded within the last 3 years. Dianex predates that." Silence, then, "You'll hear from our counsel." "I'll hear from them when they have a case. Until then, Emery can keep pretending the house isn't on fire." Click. It wasn't the lawsuit they feared. It was the precedent. If Dianex walked, others would. And they knew it. That week, 2 more former clients reached out. One signed an intent letter. The other asked how soon we could onboard. Our CTO, a quiet guy named LJ who worked from a basement in Oregon, nearly cried when he saw the new build handling stress tests without a hitch. We were gaining momentum, and for the first time in months, I felt something stabilizing under my feet. Word got out, as it always does. Industry chatter, Slack messages, tweets from burner accounts. The guy they fired just took a crown jewel. Pendrell equals real threat. Laurentech better wake up. I didn't post anything, didn't update my profile. I stayed focused on the product, the people, the next swing. But that first hit, clean, legal, undeniable, it landed like thunder. And I knew Emery heard it. That night, I walked into my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of the room. No music, no emails. Just the ambient hum of city traffic 15 floors down. I poured a scotch, sat on the arm of the couch, looked out the window. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was control. And I hadn't realized how badly I missed it. The moment I stepped into the atrium of the Westbridge Convention Center, I felt the eyes, not obvious ones, the subtle kind, pause conversations, name badges scanned twice, half smiles from people who hadn't spoken to me in years, but suddenly remembered my name. Pendrell wasn't just a whisper anymore. 3 weeks after the Dianex deal went public, we'd onboarded 2 more legacy clients and published a case study that, without naming names, made it clear we were outperforming our old employer in every measurable way. We didn't chase headlines, but headlines found us. The conference lobby buzzed with warm lights, bad coffee, and industry optimism. And right in the center of it, a Pendrell Systems booth. Simple, sharp. Kara had insisted we keep it understated. Black backdrop, clean logo, no giveaways or gimmicks. Just truth printed in quiet bullet points. Marcus leaned over to me during setup and said, "You realize we're the ones to watch now, right?" I nodded, but I didn't let it get to my head. By the end of day 1, 3 outlets had requested interviews. I agreed to one, live panel, small room, moderated by a tech journalist who looked like he'd waited years for a moment like this. I sat down, mic clipped, blazer pressed. The first 10 minutes were softball questions. Then he leaned forward, eyebrows raised. So, let's talk about the elephant. You were fired by Laurentech just 4 months ago. Now they're losing clients you helped build. Emery Vale hasn't commented. Anything you want to say to her from this stage? I smiled, tilted my head slightly. Number, I'll let our performance speak. He tried again. But surely there's a part of you that feels, what? Vindicated? I kept my tone even. I feel focused, that's all. It played well. The clip made the rounds, not because I gave them drama, but because I didn't. In a world addicted to outrage, restraint hits harder. By the second day of the summit, Pendrell's booth was packed. Investors, clients, even a few ex-Laurentech staffers who handed me their resumes discreetly. Word had gotten out that their ship was taking on water, and no one wanted to be the last to grab a lifeboat. That afternoon, Marcus handed me a phone with a look I recognized instantly. You should take this. I stepped outside the hall and answered. Daniel Rourke, said a voice I hadn't heard since the boardroom handshake. Robert Langston, chair of Laurentech's board, once an ally, now a question mark. I was hoping we could talk, informally, perhaps coffee this week. About what? A possible partnership, or perhaps just some mutual clarity. I let the silence stretch, then said, I think clarity's exactly what you have right now. He hesitated. This isn't coming from Emery. She's not involved in this request. There it was. She shouldn't be, I said, but I'm afraid I'm booked up, indefinitely. I ended the call. That night, I made a quiet detour. A driver dropped me off 5 blocks from my old building. I walked the rest of the way alone, coat collar up, hood low. The building looked the same glass, same glow. But something had shifted inside it. Through the lobby windows, I spotted at least 4 new faces at reception. No laughter, no momentum, just people clinging to chairs, unsure of when the next shakeup would come. I didn't stay long, just long enough to confirm what I'd already suspected. The heart was gone. Emery had gutted it in the name of evolution. I walked away without looking back. By the time I returned to Pendrell HQ, a floor in a converted warehouse we'd just leased outright, Kara and Marcus were in the war room, laptops open, scribbles on the walls. Client leads from the summit? I asked. 10, maybe 12, Kara said. 3 serious. And Laurentech? Marcus grinned. Fired Roberta Chen this morning. She was the last exec standing from your original team. Desperation had set in. I pulled out a marker and sketched a circle on the whiteboard. This is where we were, I said, then another circle. This is where we are, a third, larger one. And this is where we're going. The plan wasn't to crush them. That was too small, too reactive. The plan was to outlast them, outbuild them, outlive the culture that traded people for trend decks. Emery wanted headlines. I wanted history. And we were already writing it. The new office smells like ambition and fresh paint. Glass walls, natural light, polished concrete floors. Industrial modern, but not cold. There's movement everywhere. Conversations in hallways, laughter behind closed doors. Whiteboards filled with ideas I no longer need to initiate. Pendrell Systems isn't just surviving anymore. We're scaling. 6 months ago, I was packing up a cardboard box while a CEO with no memory of the company's roots dismissed me with a line about evolution. Now, I'm standing in the heart of the operation they never saw coming, a company built by the very people they labeled obsolete. We exceeded revenue projections in month 4. By month 5, we'd signed 5 of Laurentech's former top 10 clients. Not stolen, earned. Clients who left on their own terms, tired of being treated like numbers by people who no longer understood them. And last week, 2 of their biggest engineers jumped ship and joined us, without negotiation. Just trust. Yesterday I got the news. Emery Vale resigned. Official statement says personal reasons. Internally, the board pushed her out after back-to-back quarterly misses and a wave of executive exits they couldn't stop. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I just read the headline, nodded once, and closed the tab. What needed to happen had happened. But the moment that caught me off guard came this morning. I was reviewing our second quarter forecasts when Kara knocked on my door. She handed me a sleek envelope. hand-delivered, no sender. I opened it and saw Robert Langston's signature at the bottom of a note typed on heavy linen paper. Daniel, in light of recent changes, the board would value your input on our path forward. We'd welcome a conversation. No expectations, just clarity. Let us know if you're open to a conversation. I didn't even finish reading it before passing it across the desk. Kara raised an eyebrow. Want me to reply? I nodded. Politely decline and refer them to Michelle. She smiled, just a flicker, but it meant everything. Michelle Chang had been a rising star in Lauren Tech's analytics division until Emory cut her during the Streamline initiative. I brought her on in month 2. Now she's one of our VPs and the sharpest mind on our strategy team. Let the board ask her about direction. She's the future now. Later that afternoon, I sat down for a filmed interview with a major industry podcast. The studio was minimal, just 2 chairs, cameras, and a quiet host who clearly wanted to ask about the elephant in the room without stepping in anything. About halfway through, he leaned in slightly. What was your motivation? You could have walked away, started something small, consulted. Instead, you built this. Why? I thought about lying, about giving some canned answer about vision or opportunity or leadership in the post-COVID world, but I didn't. I looked at him and said, they bet against memory, and numbers never forget. He smiled, so did I. By evening, the office was quieting down. People left at decent hours here. No burnout trophies, no glorified suffering, just work that mattered and people who knew it. I stayed behind, not because I had to, but because I still liked it. I walked into the corner office, mine, but unmarked, and opened the small leather-bound journal I keep in the drawer. It's the same one I started the night I got fired. First page still says, break glass only. I flipped to the last page and wrote, she thought I was part of the past. I was just getting started. I closed the book, set it aside, and turned to the window. The city lights were coming on, one by one, data points in motion, waiting to be read. And I went back to work.